Thanks everyone for joining. I think we can begin now. Today we're gonna discuss what's new in our 2020 release wave 1. We will go through the features, new components, enhancements that we have done uh, through the different toolkits that we offer, and also some of our new products that we have brought to the market. Um, so let me begin quickly with introducing myself. My name is Mohammed Abdul Kareem. I'm the solution support team lead. I'm going to be conducting the webinar today. In the panelists, we also have Daniel Kai, our managing director, and we also have our support team available. So if you have any questions through the chat, they could address them. However, we will have a QA section at the end of our webinar today, so I can address any question that you could have through the webinar that we're going to have today. We are aiming to conclude our webinar in within an hour, but there is a possibility that we could go over an hour a little bit. So hopefully that should be okay with you. Now, I will begin first with an introduction about Kingsway Soft. We are a leading data integration solution provider, mainly for Microsoft Dynamics and other enterprise applications as well. Basically, the toolkits that we offer came from the lesson that we learned from working with larger scale CRM integration projects. So we try to design our components to solve some of the challenges that you might face with some of your integration projects, and maybe solve some and ease some of the pain points that you could run into. We offer multiple toolkits for different enterprise applications. These are some of the services that we support. We actually have more than what you see in the slide, as we're going to discuss, for example, today, the new services that we have added. So not just Dynamics, we have other components that can help you connect, let's say, to Salesforce, SharePoint, pretty much any two systems that you see on this slide. You can make them integrate with each other or talk to each other. So this is what makes our toolkit a little bit powerful, where it actually works on top of SSIS, and we offer a lot of different services that you can utilize within your integration service project to communicate between these application or database systems. Now, the benefits of using an SSIS integration toolkit. First, if it is a codeless integration, as you're already familiar if you have used SSIS. So it's mostly a drag and drop experience. You don't really need to write any code. Maybe you could write an SSIS expression here and there, but you don't really have to have a, let's say, a coding background to get started using our toolkits. Our toolkits are very flexible to use. As we mentioned, is built on the Microsoft SQL Server Integration Services platform. So if you already have SQL Server in your environment, you can use our toolkit to plug it on top of your existing environment. And if you're already familiar with SSIS, then our toolkit can also be familiar in terms of the design methodology that governs any SSIS components in general. It is very cost effective, as we're going to discuss at the very end of our webinar today, some of the pricing and licensing models that we have. So it's very competitive, and it is the best value for your investment when it comes for integration solutions. Also, we provide unparalleled performance. Mainly our software leverages the existing SSIS engine, plus we design certain features that helps increase the performance of your integration or migration projects in general. Now, our Kingsway Soft 2020 release wave 1 has a lot of new features and enhancements. We will try to highlight the major, let's say, new products, new components, new enhancements that you could find useful in your integration projects, especially if you are already using our toolkits and you're already leveraging in your environment. this release basically is one of our biggest releases so far. We have one new product that we're going to discuss, which is our integration gateway. We have added more than 2 new services, support for 20 new services, whether for REST or other APIs. We have a total of 69 new SSIS components, and we, across all of our toolkits, we have done more than 600 feature enhancements or bug fixes. So that's a relatively big release, maybe the biggest one that we had so far. Now, we're gonna begin with the SSIS productivity pack. So we're gonna go through the services that we have added, the components that we have added, and some of the enhancements also that we have added. So to begin, we have added 17 new REST services. So if you're already using our REST components, you will know that we support multiple REST services using the REST Connection Manager, for example, and REST Source and Destination component, as we're going to see later. We actually added to that list 17 more new services. So, for example, we have Teamwork, LinkedIn, Twitter for Business, Insightly, Acumatica. So we have eBay. So these are services that has been requested by many clients, and we think it is very useful to have them in our productivity pack. So in case that you want to integrate your existing application or database servers or database server to any of these services, you can definitely now do so with our REST components instead of sending your own, let's say, API calls and receiving them manually. So this is going to also save a little bit of development time in terms of connecting to your instance, selecting the object or entity you want to work with, and we handle all the intricate details in terms of handling the API in the background. With our Ultimate Edition, now we support over than 100 APIs and different services, and that's of course, especially if you are an existing customer that using the Ultimate Edition, then you'll see the benefit of using this license, where you have access to everything that we pretty much offer in terms of enhancements regarding SSIS integration toolkits specifically. Now, for the REST components, if someone is unfamiliar with the REST components, basically we have a REST connection manager that comes included with our SSIS productivity pack. When you create a REST connection manager, you will have a drop-down menu, which pretty much is the service name, and in that drop-down menu, you will pick the application or the service that you want to connect to. So in that drop-down menu, we have added the 17 new services. So this is an example of Teamwork. You can select Teamwork, put in your credentials, and then you'll be able to connect to your instance. Once you can create the connection manager, or you can use a REST source component to retrieve data from the service that you have connected to. And we connect to different APIs if they are provided by the service, and same thing for source objects and endpoints. So for one object, you can find different endpoints, and in the drop-down menu, you'll find all the available or exposed endpoints that you can work with. And also, this is applicable for the REST destination component if you want to write data to the selected REST service. So maybe to get this a little bit closer on how this will look like in a development environment, I can switch to Visual Studio, which is the debugging environment, or let's say the design time environment that you use in order to create an SSIS package. I have one already created for REST. So if I can see here, for example, for the Teamwork Connection Manager, from the drop-down menu, I can select the Teamwork service that I want to connect to. Let's say I want to connect to something else, like MailChimp or something like in the new services that we have offered, such as Acumatica, then you can definitely choose that from the list. And then you put your service URL. Of course, the UI of the connection would change depending on the service that you're connecting to. So each service or API has its own way of authenticating, so that could differ a little bit. But pretty much is straightforward, where you create the connection manager, put the credentials in, and then test the connection to make sure that you have established a connection. Once you have done this, you can go to the REST source component. You can select the Teamwork or the other REST connection manager that I have created. And in the APIs, you will find all the APIs that we support. For example, for Teamwork, we have a CRM. If the service doesn't have multiple APIs, then you will not see that drop down there. And then you choose a source object, and in the columns page, you'll find all the data coming in from the endpoint regarding your the instance that you're working with, of course. And if it requires any filtering parameter, you're gonna put these as well in the source component. Of course, we offer a way to parameterize the filtering conditions, so you can put variables and make it more dynamic in terms of filtering data based on SSIS parameters or SSIS variables. Similarly, for the destination component, you would choose the Teamwork or the REST connection manager you have created, choose the endpoint and the object. And for each object, you're gonna find different actions that's gonna depend on the API and the available endpoints for each object, of course. And in the columns, you would map the source input columns to the destination fields that are gonna be sent to the endpoint. So that's in a nutshell how the REST components look like. So let me go back to our presentation, and then we can see additional new services that we have added and components outside of the REST services that we have mentioned. We have, for example, new components such as our premium message queue task. So this is a task that can connect to different messaging queue servers. So we support different servers such as, let's say, RabbitMQ, IBMMQ, MSMQ. We have actually a list of the MQ servers that you can connect to, and the task will listen based on the configuration that you have chosen for incoming messages, and then you can choose to peek only or delete the received message, for example. We have also conversion components, so these are data flow transformation components, mainly the composition and decomposition components. These are used to, let's say, extract or let's say normalize the data in a way, or extract that data from, let's say, comma delimited format or XML format or JSON array format, and you want it in a tabular format, then you can use the decomposition component for that. Or the other way around, if you want to group certain columns to be comma separated or in an XML format, then you can use the composition component for that. So we will see how this component can be used and how it's going to be helpful in your integration projects in general. We have also premium aggregate component. That's a data flow component, of course, and that's similar to the out-of-the-box component, but it adds more feature and gives you more flexibility in terms of defining the aggregate or group by function that you want to do in your data. We have also premium tasks, such as the premium expression task. So the out-of-the-box expression task supports few functions. Our premium version of the expression task supports more than 150 functions, of course, including the out-of-the-box ones, but you will find more flexibility in terms of you'll find regex functions for regex find, regex replace. That's very powerful in terms of manipulating strings. You'll find functions to read and write data from a text file. You'll find functions to parse the JSON data or XML data. So it's a pretty powerful task that you can use to do pretty much any transformation in your string data. We have also premium file properties tasks. All of these are new components. The premium file properties task, this allows you to check the properties of the file that you have in your local SFTP or FTPS server and change the properties if necessary. Encryption task, we have a new component. It's a data flow transformation component that's called premium hash. So you can have your input data coming in, and then you can configure the component to create a hash value based on the row or the column. So if you want to have a hash value to validate, let's say, the data in a certain role, you can use that component for this purpose. For new services that we have added, we have the Azure files. So this helps you working with Azure files, of course, in terms of reading data, writing Azure files to your instance, or pulling them down, let's say, to your local file system or other servers that you have in your environment. For timing and automation tasks, we have Azure functions. So if you're working with Azure functions to trigger, let's say, a function to do a specific job, you can definitely use our either the data flow components or the task to do so. We have also SSH task, so you can connect to an SSH server, and through the SSH task, you can run SSH command from your integration service package. Finally, in part of our premium file pack, we have new WebDAV components. So if you're working with a WebDAV server to host your files, you can use our components to read these files or write to a WebDAV server. Of course, when it comes to storage components that we, or storage service that we support, they also going to be included in our premium file transfer task. So within the premium file transfer tasks, you're going to find the Azure Files Connection Manager available. Same thing for the WebDAV. Also, it's going to be available with the connection manager going to be available with the premium Excel source or destination, or the premium flat file source and destination. So that way you can read your Excel file directly from your cloud storage without locally saving it to your hard drive. So this is in a nutshell the new components. Quickly, the Azure files, as I've mentioned, going to come with the Azure File Connection Manager source and a destination component, so you can send and receive data from Azure files. WebDAV going to have the same three main components, and through the Connection Manager, you can use with the our premium file pack offering that we have in the SSIS Productivity Pack. Now with Azure Functions, besides the connection manager source and destination component, you're going to have the task. So as you can see, for example, in the destination component, you're going to trigger the execution of a certain Azure function, and then you can receive the response if you want through the or we can receive the response, let's say, from a source component and save it, let's say, to a database or another application. We support all the major functions depending on the function configuration that you have set in the Azure side, the Azure portal, and you can use the these components or the tasks to trigger your code that you have written on the cloud. Now, we can switch, quickly switch to the demo environment to show you the components that we have mentioned. If I switch here, if we go to the control flow, I can see the REST component. Now we have the new services. So we have the Azure files. The Azure files, we're going to see our Azure Files Connection Manager. I can connect to my storage account. I have source component to read my data. I can have all the properties of my files, and I have item selection mode, so I can read the level I'm standing on, read a single file, or read recursively, where I can pull all the files under one directory and any child directory as well. If you don't push data to Azure files, you can use the Azure Files destination components. You can have data coming in, let's say, from a database source or from another application, and you want to move these files from that application to Azure files, then you can use a destination component for that. You will see the WebDAV also have a connection manager where you're going to connect to your server that you have on-prem, for example, and then you can can read the data through the source component and write the data through the destination component. Now, these, as I mentioned, these connection manager also works with the premium file transfer tasks. So within one task, you can move your data across different cloud storage, let's say, providers that we support, or local your local system or SFTP or FTPS server. So through this drop-down menu, if you have SharePoint Connection Manager, or if you have, let's say, Amazon S3, you're going to show up here, and you can mix and match the source and destination settings so that you move your data between different storage solutions. And similarly, finally, as I mentioned, also Premium Excel source and Premium Flat File can plug in directly or leverage the Azure Files and WebDAV connection managers, so you can read your Excel files and parse it directly from the cloud storage or from your WebDAV server without downloading the file first. For Azure functions, we can see that, for example, I have this Azure function task where I can put my URL, I put my authorization code, and then I can preview the function that I'm trying to call. So this way you can debug the code, you can write your body, and you can click execute within the design time. And as you can see now, the function has executed on the Azure side of things and then returned the result to me back here. So you can, within the design time, it is convenient to work with our editor to create your body or headers to work with your function. For the SSH task, you connect through the SSH connection manager to your server, and then you can type your command here, and you can actually also list your command within the design time environment, so you can verify that it is working or not. So if I click this command, this is going to connect to my SSH server and going to show me the result of that command. I can save that command to a variable, or I can save it where I can use that variable, let's say, to do further processing on it, whether using our expression task or using something else, such as saving it to a file or saving it to a database directly. With the premium message queue task, as you can see, I can connect to the supported MQ servers. In our example today, I have an Azure Service Bus Connection Manager and an AMQP Connection Manager. But this actually supports more services, and the task itself, it can receive messages, and also it can send messages as well. When you receive messages, it can peek. So basically, to just read the message, or you're going to receive it and delete it after it reads it. And then the message body itself, you can save it to a variable, or you can save it to a file. Also, there is a listener mode, so that way you can tell the task how long it should wait for listening for incoming messages. So you can select fixed time if you want it to listen for a certain period of time, or wait until, let's say, a variable, or until you stop the execution of the package. We have also the premium file properties task. So through this task, you can select a file or a directory, and then you can read the file properties, or you can update the file properties. If you're going to read the file properties, you can have filter parameters, where you can select the property that you want to filter on, and then work with our editor in order to specify your criteria. So it gives you more flexibility in terms of what exactly you want to read. While for updating file properties, you can also filter have a filtering condition where you pinpoint what are the files that you want to update, and then in the property output mapping here, or the file property to update, you will select the property you want to update. So you can, for example, update the name and put the name here, or a variable, and pretty much it's going to rename the file that you have on your file system. Okay. So these are the new components that we had. Now we're gonna, or the new services. Now we're gonna move on to the PowerPoint, where we can see the new data flow components. So for the data flow components, first we have new conversion components that we have mentioned, which is the composition and decomposition components. That basic use case is going to be, which actually comes up quite often. We had multiple clients who particularly ran into a case where they wanted a component that does this particular function that going to make their integration job a little bit easier to work with, or to design rather. And the basic idea for composition, for example, if you have, let's say, a client or an account or a contact, the same email, but it has different emails. So one contact, same full name, has different emails. And you want instead of having each email in its own row, you want one name, and you want the emails comma separated. So you want to save the data that is shared between a criteria, let's say full name in that matter, you want them to be grouped together, and you want them to be saved in a single cell, where you can save it in, let's say, in a database table, or if the API you are working with, or the system you are working with expecting the data to be comma separated. So you would use the composition component in this case. The decomposition component is the opposite case, where you receive the data comma separated, let's say. So for example, you have email address and you have a comma separated phone number, different phone numbers for the same account, for example. And you want, instead of, and you want to send the phone numbers, one phone number at a time, whether you want to save that as a normalized data in your database or through another application that expects a single value in the phone number field. In this case, you would use the decomposition component, and what it's gonna do, it's gonna, let's say, break down the combined structure of the phone numbers, whether it is delimited through a comma or let's say a JSON or XML elements, and then it's gonna have each row where you have the email and one single phone number. So if you have one email that has 3 phone number comma separated, the component gonna return 3 records where each record gonna have one phone number and the same email, of course. So let me show you how this looks like so you can have a better visualization of how the component looks like. Okay. So if we go to the composition component, this is a database that are coming from my source component. As you can see here, I have data, pretty much same person, same full name, but it has 2 email addresses. In this case, I just added on one at the end of the email address, so you can see that these are 2 different addresses. Now, let's say I want to have the same full name, Abby Olson, for example, and then I have email 1, comma, email 2. That's how I would like to have the data look like. So in this case, I would use our composition component where I can select the input column, which I want to work on, which pretty much is the personal email. And then I'm gonna choose the destination time, how you would like to see the data combined. Do you want it to be delimited text, or do you want it to be a JSON array or XML element? I'm gonna choose delimited text. And then you can choose the key column that's gonna be used for grouping. You can actually choose more than one column if I have more available. So that's gonna be the criteria of defining if a record is duplicate, or let's say matches, the matching criteria for the grouping of the input column. And in this case, I'm using the full name. And if your data is not sorted, you would check this checkbox, which is indicating the component that the input records are scrambled. It could have a little bit of impact on your performance. So if your data is already sorted, we suggest unchecking this option. And these are the settings to set the delimiters and the text qualifiers, and this is the output column name. So now if I click OK, and if I can enable a data view or run the task, I'm going to show you how the data looks like coming in and how it's going to look like coming out. And the decomposition going to be pretty much the exact opposite of the use case that we are working with. So let's give it a few seconds to run, and then we can see this is the data coming in. We can see that I have the same full name, pretty much everyone, every person is repeated twice, and it has 2 email addresses. Now if I run it, this is the output of the component. Now I have only one record for each person, and the email address is now comma separated. I can have that a JSON array, I can have it an XML component. It makes it very difficult grouping the data and sending them in one data structure, whether they're gonna be CSV or JSON or XML. Now we're gonna reverse the situation where we have the data coming in grouped by already, and then we're gonna try to, let's say, break it down to different rows depending on how many elements that you have or how many phone numbers or emails that you have in the record. So I'm running this task right now. I can see the input data coming in from the source, which is the full name, and I have comma separated value. Now I want to split this further. So this is the input. I click proceed, and now this is the output. So the output now is the exact opposite. Now I have this value, this record, split into 2 different records now. It has the same full name, but each one gonna have different email address based on what you have in the comma separated value here. So if I had 3 email addresses, I'm gonna have 3 records for Abby also. So that's decomposition and decomposition components. We have also premium aggregate component. So I mentioned that it expands the functionality of the out-of-the-box component, where you have more operations that you can work with and more flexibility in terms of working with the group by or the aggregate editor. We also had the mentioned the premium messaging queue task, and we saw how it works. As I've mentioned, it supports multiple messaging queue systems such as Amazon SQS, AMQP, Azure Service Bus, IBM MQ, MSMQ, and RabbitMQ. And we had the premium expression task, as we've mentioned, where you can write SSIS expressions and you assign the value or the output of these expressions to a variable. The expression itself can be, as we mentioned, pretty powerful, where you can work with our 225 plus functions that we offer to manipulate and work with your string data. We had the premium file properties task editor, and we saw how you can check the file properties that you have or update the properties of the file if needed. Finally, we have the also the premium hash component. So we support different hash algorithms that you can use, and in the premium hash component, you can set the scope to the record level or the row level. So you can calculate the hash for the entire row or the entire column. We had the SSH task. We saw how it can run commands on your SSH server if needed. And I can quickly show you now the premium hash component that we have as a data flow transformation component. So here's the premium hash component. I have data coming in from the source component. I can select the columns that I want to calculate the hash for. So you don't necessarily need to calculate the hash for the entire row. You can definitely do that if you include all the columns, or you can only calculate the hash for certain columns that you have in a single row. Same thing, you can calculate the hash, but for in a scope in terms of the column level, not the row level. So that way you select one column and you can calculate the hash for the entire data in that column, or you can actually group two columns together or create the hash for each column on its own. So when you choose, for example, the row level, you have the hash algorithm going to be set for the entire row. When you use the column level, you're going to have the hash algorithm set for each column that you're trying to calculate the hash for. And the row level, we have, as we mentioned, different hash algorithms that you can choose from, and you can save the, or you can have an output column name defined, which gonna include the hash value that has been calculated by the component. So if I run this this task, I will see that there is a new column that got created, and this column includes the hash of the two fields that I have selected in the design of the component or in the configuration of the component itself. So here's the two columns that I have. I actually selected the two columns to be calculated hash for, and here is the new column with the hash value I have calculated. So you can save that in a database, or if there is an application where it requires the hash of the data, that's going to be a useful component to work with instead of working with complex SSIS expressions. Okay. Now we can move forward to our Dynamics toolkit. We had some enhancements and bug fixes. Mainly, we added support for global discovery service when it comes to CRM or CDS connection manager. We also support working with the new file field type. So instead of working solely with the annotation entity where you want to store, let's say, attachments or files, now there is support for the file data type that can be included within an entity in CDS. Also, we added a new action called revise code, which can be used to revise a code through the CRM destination component. Finally, in the lookup component, we have added, or the lookup feature in the destination component, we have added another option called smart name match. and it can be used to perform a lookup between two names, but not in the exact same format. So for example, you could find one CRM instance where the name format is first name space last name, while the other instance is last name comma first name. So with the previous version, if you try to do a lookup with these two different formats, of course the lookup gonna fail because the two strings doesn't match. Now the component is actually smart to understand that these are the same names but in different formats, and of course this is applicable for the name fields. For Dynamics 365 BC and Nav, we have added support to read from child objects. This was a common request where you want to work with line items or child objects, whether for sales orders or for invoices. So for example, sales orders, you can have sales lines, invoices, you can have invoice lines. And then you can either read the primary data with the lines items through the source component, and we also support the same thing with the destination component. So you can write sales orders and sales order lines as the component can accept two inputs now. We also have added ability to quickly toggle the string and numeric value fields through the different length of numeric and string fields, so that way you can adjust the source component so that you can accommodate the more data coming in from the server if needed. So this is also a nice feature to have to increase or decrease the length of your columns in the source component. Now, just to repeat the CRM features, we're gonna switch to the demo and we're gonna show you the two features that we have added, especially the text lookup feature for CRM. So I'm gonna switch to our development environment, and here I can get I'm going to switch this to the other side, the dynamic CRM. So in this dynamic CRM case, I'm spawning a dummy record, and then I have the username which has a last name, comma, first name. This is not the format that the CRM instance I'm working with is configured with. So if I configure the text lookup here, and if I don't check this option, the text lookup gonna fail. However, if I check this option, the component gonna understand it's the same name and it's gonna succeed. So we can quickly give that a try. So I have unchecked this option. Now the name as a string doesn't exactly match what is in the instance. So we should expect the component to fail when it is trying to find the lookup for that record. So now getting back to our use case. So now we have seen that the component has failed with an error message where the text lookup has failed for the owner ID field. So that's what we expect. Now when we enable the text lookup feature or the new feature in the text lookup operation, which is the smart name match, we should expect that record to be created successfully. Just give it a few seconds to run. And now we're sending the same data, we haven't changed it, but the component now the CR have understood the text lookup operation and got the good value and created the record successfully as we have seen. Now for the nav child object support, as you're gonna see in the source component, now when you work with an object that has a child object related to it, such as sales order, you're gonna find that child object drop-down menu shows up with the child object name. And in the columns page, now you're gonna have two tabs, one for the primary output, which is the sales order, and one for sales line. That's going to be the lines related to the orders that you are trying to read. And of course, our component going to have a parent link number, so you can use to link the children or the child records that you are retrieving to link them back to the parent record in the primary output. Similarly, so this is in case of reading. Now, in case of writing, our component can now accept two inputs. So one for the sales orders, for example, and one for the sales lines. And then in the destination component, you would map the child entity to the input. So sales lines here is the name of this component. I'm mapping it to the sales lines child entity that is related to the sales order entity here. And the columns here also in the mapping, I'm going to have 2 pages, one for the primary output, which is the order itself, or the sales order itself, and one for the sales lines items that are related to my orders. And as you can see here, we have the parent link number that you can pass in order to link the lines back to the parent record. So that way our component can understand to create this this particular sales order with these particular lines associated with it. Okay, so let us switch back to the demo, or sorry, the PowerPoint, and then we can move forward to our new product, which is our integration gateway. So our integration gateway, the main idea behind it is to facilitate real-time integration. So as you know, SSIS is basically a batch processing platform where you schedule the execution of your SSIS packages based on an interval. So you can say every 5 minutes at the end of each day, or every 10 minutes. Some cases you can even do it within 2 minutes, but you have to design your package in a way where it reads only the incremental data. The data has changed, and then you are tied, or you have a window of integration that you would expect in terms of the data getting moved from one system to the other. So if you have set the SQL Server agent to 5 minutes, so you could expect for up to, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes of delay between a record getting written from one system until it gets integrated to the other system. Now, in some special situations and some scenarios, you want to have a real-time integration where you want a record to be integrated as fast as possible. As soon as it was created in system 1, you want it to be integrated in the other system right away. And to implement that, or the approach that we have taken to offer a product that could make this possible, is to work with the provided webhook interfaces that are supported by different applications. So major applications such as HubSpot, CRM, Zendesk, Xero, Dropbox, all of these supports the webhook interfaces, which is a technology where the application itself, or the service itself, sends a request to a client, or let's say in this case it's our integration gateway server. It sends a request, or it sends, let's say you can consider it as a notification that one record has been created or has been updated. Sometimes they send the entire record with the data, and sometimes they only send the notification, let's say with the record ID that was created. Now with the webhooks, the integration gateway can be configured to be running as a service in Windows, and it continually listening to the requests being sent from the services that you have configured. And once it receives that request, which basically is a notification, or let's say the record that has changed, you can configure the gateway to send that record to either, let's say, a FLAP file or to a messaging queue server. Now, combining with the new premium messaging queue task that we have provided in this release, you can use the integration gateway to receive the webhook request, sending it, then it will send it to a messaging queue server of your choice if it is supported in our list that we have mentioned earlier. And then the premium messaging queue task gonna listen and capture this message, and you can push it directly to your system. Now, usually the webhooks would send data, let's say, in JSON format, or in let's say XML format. So we also have added a new feature, especially with our JSON source component, where it can read the data from a variable, from an SSIS variable. So instead of typically reading JSON data from an endpoint or from a file, now the JSON source component can read that data from a variable. So now if we can piece all these features that we have added together, now we have a reliable solution where we can get the change as soon as it has been done in system one, get it through the integration gateway. The gateway gonna send it to the messaging queue server. Our premium file transfer, our premium messaging queue task gonna capture this message, and with our JSON source component, it's gonna read this message and parse it, and then it can push it to another database or another system that you're trying to integrate with. So basically, if we want to visualize how this is gonna look like, first the app gonna send the message to the gateway gonna send it to the messaging queue server, and then you would choose further integration, whether to trigger the SSIS package to read the message or to make the package itself continuously running to capture the message as soon as it receives it, or you can save that message to a file. So you can save it to a file or a database if you want to keep track of the changes on your local system as soon as it happens. So now I'm gonna show you quickly how this configuration could look like with a live demo, with a live use case, and this is gonna help you picture a little bit more how the solution gonna look like. So I'm gonna switch to our gateway server. So this is our gateway application. I have my HTTP server page. This basically runs an HTTP server on the port that I have specified, where the gateway gonna be waiting for incoming webhooks or coming requests coming from different services, telling it that record has been created or has been changed. Then in the inbound webhooks, I'm gonna configure let's say the credentials or the connections to the webhooks that I'm expecting to receive. So for example, our example today going to be with HubSpot. We have provided the client secret of the application that's going to be sending the webhooks requests to our local integration gateway server. And then I can choose different destinations. So in the destinations, you need to configure them first in the outbound connections. So you can have a file. So basically the request coming in from the webhook gonna be saved to a file, or you're gonna have a messaging queue server. In this case, I'm working with Azure Service Bus. However, you can work with any of our supported messaging queue servers that you see in the list here. Now the messaging queue server bus, I have my credentials put in here, and then I can, in the inbound webhooks, a link to the Azure Service Bus connection that I'm working with, and I'm sending the message that I'm getting from the webhook to the queue, which is called CRM account. And I'm putting a message label called HubSpot. Now I can have the same webhook request or the same webhook notification that I have gotten be written, let's say, to another, let's say, file connection. So in this case, same message is going to be written to a file and it's going to be sent to a messaging queue. So if we go, so now we can send the message to the messaging queue. Now the next part going to be capturing the message from messaging queue. So in this case, I'm going to switch to my SSIS environment, which we all are familiar with. And in this case, I'm going to be working with our new premium message queue task. In the premium messaging queue task, I'm listening to the same Azure Service Bus queue, which is the CRM account. And then I'm, of course, using the receive mode because I'm reading or waiting for messages to be read. And the listening mode, you can choose fixed time. In this case, I'm choose until service is stopped. So this means that the messaging queue can keep running as long as the package is running. So if you terminate the package, then of course the component is going to stop running. Now, once a message is received, what's going to happen is this component going to have a check mark because it received a message, and it's going to send this message. I have saved it to a variable, as you can see here, called JSON data. And in the JSON source, I have configured the JSON source to read the user JSON data, which is the variable I have created, which now has the body of the webhook request that the messaging queue server has read from the queue system, from the queuing for the messaging queuing system. Of course, I put the document design here, and now I have my data parsed already in tabular format. I can push it to, let's say, dynamic CRM if I'm integrating this to a dynamic server. You can have this as a database, you can have this as a different server. Pretty much you are flexible in terms of where you want to integrate this data to. Now, if I've done this, now we only executed this once. I want this to keep going. I want the package to keep listening for future messages that could be sent. So this is the reason that we have everything put in a for loop container. And this for loop container has one simple condition. It says it's going to always run as long as a Boolean variable is true. So this Boolean variable I have set it to true here. So this means this package gonna run indefinitely. It's not gonna stop. So how can I stop it if I want to say I want to stop? I don't want to terminate it. I want to stop it. So I can use something like an execute SQL task. And through the execute SQL task, I can read a value from a table, a Boolean value, and I can adjust it or assign it to that user variable. So what this is going to do is if you go to that table and you type false or you set the Boolean to false, then the next run, the component going to set the variable to false and it's going to exit outside of the loop. So if you want to terminate the package, you can simply set that Boolean to false in your database or even flat file, depending on your approach. And once you do that, the package is going to terminate. So now if I run this package, I have everything set up. So if I run this package or I run this container, the premium messaging queue task gonna keep running until it receives a message from the messaging queue. And the messaging queue gonna receive a message as soon as a webhook is sent to the integration gateway, which in turn the integration gateway gonna send it to the messaging queue server. So now this is running. This is not gonna return anything unless I send the message. So I'm gonna open our test HubSpot instance. I'm gonna go to contacts here. And as you can see here, I have enabled a data viewer from the JSON source component. So I can capture the data as soon as it comes in. And then I can create a new contact. So the trigger I have set or the webhook sends a notification to our gateway when we create a contact. So I'm just gonna put any dummy data for now, and then click create contact. So now I have created the contact. HubSpot should now send a request to our gateway. Gateway send it to the messaging queue server, and now I have my data captured with the new object ID, which is the new HubSpot ID. So this is real time. As soon as I click create, now I got the data in the package right away. Now, if I, let's say, pass this record, let's say, so I have 1451, right? So the loop gonna go back again, and it's the messaging queue gonna wait for another change. So let us create another contact, and we should see the object ID changes because we're gonna create a brand new one. So here is the contact, create contact, and let's test 2. And we're gonna have the same name. Now we created it. Now we should see that actually the object ID has changed instantly as soon as I click create. Now I have 1501. So this way you can have the data coming from the JSON source. Of course, you can push it in this example, I'm pushing it to CRM so I can integrate this data back to CRM if I want to. In case if you have the data coming in only as the ID, you can use the HubSpot source component to query the entire data based on the ID that you have received from the webhook. So with this simple configuration where I have an integration gateway that expects notification or webhooks requests coming from the different services that you configure here, it will send it to the messaging queue server where our messaging queue task gonna capture it, and it's gonna, through the for loop approach that we have implemented, it's gonna always keep listening for new messages until you set that flag to false. It's gonna stop, or you can terminate the package if I can click stop here, for example. So this is a nutshell, the integration gateway. We support different webhooks. We actually support custom webhooks, so it gives you the flexibility to work with any system that exposes or utilizes the webhooks technology that maybe we don't have it pre-configured, so you can configure it yourself through the custom webhook property here. Now, if you go back to the PowerPoint, we are going to quickly conclude with our few announcements or few things that you should consider. One of them will be deprecations. So the Magento SSIS toolkit now is deprecated, and it is replaced with our REST framework in our productivity pack. So basically, Magento is now a REST service in our productivity pack. So you would work with the REST connection manager and REST source and destination instead of Magento connection manager and Magento source and destination. And the reason for deprecation is that our SSIS productivity pack offers much more sophisticated infrastructure. As you can see, we have a lot of transformation components where I have a lot of tasks. So with the Magento toolkit, you only had limited access to only the Magento components. Now you have access to all these components in a single product. And as I've mentioned, the SSIS productivity pack covers more than 250 components that boost your overall productivity when it comes to SSIS. Another system that has been deprecated, or another toolkit that has been deprecated, is the Zero SSIS integration toolkit, and for the same exact reason, which is the being moved to the REST services instead. And for these toolkits that has been deprecated, you should consider first that if you continue to use our toolkit, you can definitely do so. However, any future enhancements or bug fixes are not going to be offered for these toolkits. We're going to focus on of course, the offering on the REST services instead. And we highly recommend you to upgrade or to move to our REST services before any changes, especially in the API from the vendor side where it requires changes in our code. So that could be a blocking issue. So if you're already using Magento or Zero, we would recommend moving to our productivity backend instead if you can. Finally, I would quickly mention the licensing model of our products. So for the productivity pack, we have 1 year subscription license. So this is the price of one server, which is $10.95. So this is one integration server. The integration server is what you're gonna use to schedule and deploy the packages or to run it outside of Visual Studio. If you run the packages within Visual Studio, you are covered by our free developer license. You don't really need a license as long as you are running the packages within Visual Studio, as I were doing today. So today, for example, we didn't really need license and SSIS productivity pack license because all of our testing was within Visual Studio. Now, if you want to schedule it to have it run every day, then you would need a license in this case. So you could go with the 1 year subscription license, maintenance is included, of course, and upgrade is included for the entire subscription period, or you can go with the perpetual license. So that's going to be a lifetime access to the software. It's going to be $24.95. But you would pay annual maintenance to be eligible for future enhancements or releases. The perpetual license comes included with the first year of maintenance, but from the second year, you would pay the maintenance in order to have a valid maintenance license or a valid maintenance key running on your server. Now, let's say if you are interested in more than the Productivity Pack Toolkit, then in this case, we would suggest going with the Ultimate Edition. So same pricing, same licensing model, but different pricing. The Ultimate Edition gives you not only access to our Productivity Pack, but all of our toolkits, SSIS integration toolkits to be specific. So this includes Productivity Pack, Dynamics, SharePoint, all the services that we have mentioned that we have Productivity Pack or we have SSIS integration toolkits for. So the price for the subscription going to be $15.95. The perpetual license is going to be $34.95, and the maintenance going to be $8.95 per year. Now, let's say if you want to run the integration on the cloud, so instead of having a dedicated server to run the packages, you want to run it on a service such as Azure SSIS Integration Runtime, which comes under Azure Data Factory. It's a service that you can use to only execute SSIS packages. So in this case, we also provide a license, and our toolkit is compatible and supported by Azure SSIS IR runtimes. In this case, we only offer the Ultimate Edition and only through the subscription model. That's going to be $15.95 a year, and you can install our toolkit through the Express custom setup that is available through the Azure portal to activate your license key on your IR instance. Now, for the pricing of the integration gateway, so that's a different product than the integration toolkits. It's actually has the same, let's say, model where you have the 1-year subscription license, the perpetual license, and the annual maintenance. If you're gonna go with the perpetual license, just note that these are introductory prices for the integration gateway, and this is going to be outside of the Ultimate Edition. So these are not included in the Ultimate Edition, as it is a different product than the SSIS integration toolkits altogether. So if you want to leverage the capability of our integration gateway, then you can definitely try to use our integration gateway by yourself. First, we offer a trial license, of course, to give it a try. And usually the integration gateway is going to be for certain cases or certain integration scenarios where you want the integration to be as fast as possible between two systems. So of course, that's not going to be all the integration scenarios. Some of them could have flexibility where it can wait for 2 to 5 minutes of a delay. But if you find yourself that you want something that leverages SSIS and at the same time can deliver real-time integration, you can definitely look into our integration gateway. So now I'm gonna move to the questions side of our webinar today. We have pretty much just a few minutes over an hour. So I'm gonna try to answer any questions that have been has been sent through the chat message, and you can follow up on the chat and I can address them as well. So I have a loop where a question where we're asking about if the loop that I have showed can be used for data coming from AX 2009 to CRM 365. So in this case, it's not gonna, so it relies on the webhooks. The integration gateway relies on the webhooks to get the request or get the notification of the change. AX 2009 doesn't have that technology because it's a little bit older. So in this case, we will not be able to use the webhooks technology for this purpose. However, there are other methodologies which basically filtering the AX source component based on the last modification date and get only the recently changed data. But as we have mentioned, you're going to have a gap, let's say, of 2 to 5 minutes, which is basically the scheduling of the package itself through SQL Server agent. A second question was for if the webhooks could be used to link Dynamics to other applications. Yes, so Dynamics CRM or customer engagement, Dynamics 365 does have webhooks interface, so you can definitely use our integration gateway where you can set up a custom webhook and you can configure your CRM system to send the webhooks to your integration gateways. Of course, something to keep in mind is that your integration gateway, when it is installed on your whether on-premise server or a VM on the cloud, you have to open access for the webhook connection to reach your integration gateway. So this is gonna involve your networking team to allow access for incoming connection coming from Dynamics CRM into your server, which is gonna host the integration gateway.
Richard has a question. This is Daniel here. Richard has a question about the licensing difference between Ultimate. So I believe your question is about integration gateway. Our integration gateway is a separate product. It's not tied to the Ultimate license. Ultimate license is only for SSIS only. I hope that answers your question.
Is there a way to view REST component output for debugging purposes? Yes, so for the REST component, we have some, especially in the destination component, we added a feature where you can see the, let me show you, see the actual response of the server. So if you want to actually check the response coming out, the response that our component receives, you can enable the error handling here, and you can enable the response body. So this means that whatever we get from the server, we're gonna return it complete in one single field called response body, and this field gonna include all the data from the server when it comes to the single request that we have sent. So let's say if you send a service or send a request through the destination component and you expect the API to return something back, you can enable this output column to check the response from the server. So I hope that would answer your question in terms of checking or debugging the REST component. Yeah, for SOAP, so yeah, SOAP is technically deprecated, but it's still working for Dynamics. You can, we of course support we support the API web services or the API interface of Dynamics CRM, so we can definitely switch to the web API if you need it. However, the web API sometimes includes certain limitations in the API itself, and we try to work, let's say with Microsoft, and we would try to work with the current updates or the future updates of Dynamics Customer Engagement or CRM to close the gap or to reduce the gap of these limitations so that you can seamlessly switch between SOAP and the web API. I would recommend going through our blog post in terms of the current web API limitation and see if you are affected by these limitations or not. If you are not, then you can definitely switch to the web API instead. However, we are ready, and the component and the toolkit is ready as soon as let's say Microsoft pulls the block out, let's say from SOAP, you can definitely switch to web API and work with it. Yeah, so we have questions regarding the documentation for the gateway. Yes, we have the documentation ready for the integration gateway. So if you can visit our website, I can quickly show you. And under the products, you will find the integration gateway tab here. And if we go to the help manual, we will see that we discuss in details the different webhooks that you can configure, including the custom webhook, and let's say how you can actually configure the webhook on the service side. So for example, if you're working with HubSpot, we're going to tell you how you can go to, let's say, the developer account and how you create an app and configure the webhook from the HubSpot side and provide hyperlinks for any documentation to make the step easier. And the same thing, we discussed the custom webhook if you want to work with something that is not included in the pre-configured list that we have. And we also have the documentation for each destination or output connection. So each hyperlink of these is going to tell you what are the connection parameters required, let's say, to connect to IBM MQ as a destination to send the inbound webhook request for. We are also looking for writing something regarding the overall design of the for loop or the SSIS package itself to be used in conjunction with our integration gateway. But of course, this is a good starting point for you to download the integration gateway, give it a test, and of course, as I've mentioned, you can try it with a trial license first and see if it closes the gaps for some of the real-time integration scenarios that you're running in.
Thank you for joining us on our webinar. If you have questions about the new components and features within our 2020 release Wave 1, please contact us on info@kingswaysoft.com. Kingswaysoft. Data integration made easy.